Welcome to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. I am your host, Dr. Andrea Letamendi, and my co-host, Brian Ward, sends his best. If this is your first time listening, we're actually doing something a little bit different in that we have our very first audio interview. Now, typically, as many listeners know, what we usually do is we take one episode of Batman the Animated Series, we lift out the psychological science, and analyze the episode. I know that we've switched things up a few times. We've covered live action Batman films like the 89 Batman. We've also covered Suicide Squad. We've covered feature-length animated films like Assault on Arkham and The Killing Joke. So we've done a few things differently here and there, but this is our very first audio interview. I'm super excited because we were able to team up with DC Comics and speak with Sam Humphries, the writer for DC Comics' Green Lantern. Sam has done a fantastic job in terms of helping us see a character who's currently dealing with anxiety and panic. And that character is Jessica Cruz, who is a Green Lantern. In the comic, she is presenting with signs of panic and anxiety, but we also see how she overcomes the anxiety on a day-to-day basis and how she deals with her role as a superhero in terms of how to fulfill that, how to feel that she's worthy of being a superhero in the midst of the anxiety and panic that is pretty chronic and pervasive for her. So Sam does such a lovely job of demonstrating that in the comic. And also, he's pretty open about his own history of anxiety and panic. And in our interview together, he talks about where that all started, what his first initial experiences were with anxiety, and how he learned to develop some coping strategies and basically deal with it head on. So it's such a lovely story. It was such a pleasure to have him, chat about this with me. And not only is it personal, but I think it's also quite relatable and could possibly help some folks who are having some current experiences or have histories of trauma, anxiety, and panic. So I am truly delighted to introduce this interview. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. It's great to talk to you about this stuff.
I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to chat with you. I had a chance to read a recent issue of Green Lantern, and that was in January. And I was able to see that she struggles with anxiety and that she has a history of trauma. And I'm wondering if maybe we can start there, Sam, if you can let us know a little bit about Jessica Cruz and where she's been and what she's struggling with now.
Yeah, so Jessica Cruz, for those who don't know, is now one of the two Green Lanterns of Earth. Hal Jordan is off in space, and her and Simon Baz are the Green Lanterns of Earth. But Jessica is very inexperienced to the role, and she's a very new character. When they brought me in to start talking about the book, I think she had maybe only appeared in 2 or 3 issues so far. Those were the Justice League issues, and they were written by the legendary Jeff Johns, and he and I got to talk about the character, and he had some ideas about where Jessica would go, but largely Jessica was pretty new. I mean, she was a new character in a book called The Justice League with, 9 of the biggest characters in DC Comics, so she didn't get a lot of development time right off the bat, and it kind of fell to me to take what strands were there and develop a character out of it. And one of the things that was there right off the bat was her anxiety, or rather, in the stories it was established that she had, previous to getting Power Ring, she had not left her apartment for 2 years.
Wow.
And to me, that's something that I latched onto immediately and realized that, when you're developing characters or you're writing characters, you want to figure out as the creator what their emotional core is. What is their emotional core that you can come back to, that readers can relate to, and can drive them. And so for Batman, I don't have to tell you, it's the death of his parents, and that's emotional. His whole story grows from there.
Right.
Yeah, and for Jessica, it just seemed like the perfect situation. And I think DC was like a little uncertain how I would respond to I think they were a little uncertain how I would respond to not writing Hal Jordan, basically.
Hmm.
But in that moment, it was like Hal Jordan, who like this is the character for me. This is the character that I understand. I connected with her emotionally immediately, and I knew that if I could do that right off the bat, that hopefully readers could as well.
And I noticed in the writing of this comic and just in what Jessica's experiencing and how as a reader I'm understanding her, just her presentation of this. There's no subtlety about it. She says she's having anxiety attacks. Can you talk a little bit more about what that's like for her?
Yeah, I mean, her experience of having anxiety attacks is something that I write from direct experience and my own experience having anxiety and having anxiety attacks. And I wanted to write Jessica as a character. I think sometimes not just with anxiety, but just with characters in crisis, the instinct is to write them heading towards like the depths of their crisis, like kind of at their worst moment. And I wanted to write Jessica as a character, and I wanted to show a character with anxiety who was kind of coming out of their worst phase with anxiety. Somebody who has already accepted the fact that they have anxiety and has begun to do the work of realizing that, hey, this is something that I have to deal with, and I'm going to have to deal with uh, on a regular basis for quite a long time, maybe the rest of my life, and sort of see what it's like for somebody who, once they realize how bad it can get and what they really have, and they start to get realistic about it, how they begin to um, put their lives back together. And for Jessica's experience of having anxiety attacks is something that is have a power ring, having a Green Lantern ring, one of the not only one of the most dangerous weapons in the universe, but
Right.
a very weighty responsibility is something that both ways for her. It's something that increases her anxiety when she ruminates on what's the worst that could happen. It's something that alleviates her anxiety when she focuses on one of the best things that can happen, or when she realizes the joy of flying, or when she realizes the joy of helping other people. So the ring was an ingredient for me that I thought could really set off her anxiety in both directions and take the character in really interesting directions.
Right. I was so fascinated by her origin with the ring and how it wasn't necessarily all positive, that it was kind of thrust
Yeah,
upon her and she struggled with what it meant and what she would have to fulfill, being a bearer of the ring. And
yeah,
I just think that's such a realistic presentation and is so relatable because whether you have, I know she has a history of trauma, which I want to ask about, but
hmm
whether you have that history or not, if you're already feeling anxious and you have this huge responsibility, in my profession, we start to think about some of the more, I guess, experiences of like having worries and ruminations and being up at night and
hmm
generalized anxiety symptoms, which I saw really in the comic I read. It was really portrayed in such a realistic way where she's trying to sleep and she can't, and she's having these worries and ruminations and these intrusive thoughts about the what ifs, staying up at night with
yeah.
the what ifs. I've had that before, and I know
I've been
that,
there. Yeah,
yeah, I've worked with many people who the struggle is real.
yes,
And for me, just to see a superhero who is not just struggling with that, but also is, there's, I really appreciate that it's not that there's this one thing that removes her anxiety or, this cure that she discovers that like, oh, now I'm better again. She implements some strategies that can help her cope with the anxiety and help her plan ahead for fulfilling the superhero role. Can you talk a little bit about what those things are, for Jessica?
yeah. The strategies that she uses, and I think the issue you talked about reading was issue 15, the one with pancakes, right?
Yes.
That was issue 15, and if people are listening to this and they want to kind of follow along, I think that issue is a good one to read. It's a self-contained story, and it really does focus on her anxiety. And we had developed her anxiety in the previous issues, I mean, right off the bat. But this one, it was important for me to show that, in other superhero stories, or really any other kind of genre of stories, you can have, the cheesy version is, oh, I'm driven to vengeance because my family was killed, and then they get vengeance, and they're like, well, I guess I'm okay about my family. Or, like they just kind of get over it at the end of the story. And I wanted to show that anxiety are many chronic conditions that people have are ongoing struggles, and there is no magic key towards defeating them. Mm-hmm. And you can be better one day and then be worse the next, and then be better again the next day. Yeah. And I thought that was important to show, not just for Jessica to kind of go through this, but I thought it was more important for her partner Simon to see this. You know what I mean? For Simon to be like, wow, I thought you were done with that. I thought you were cured. I thought you were better from anxiety. And then for him to realize, like, wow, this is like a battle she's going to have to fight every day. Because I feel like, at least in the general public, for people who don't have a lot of experience firsthand with this kind of thing, whether for themselves or through loved ones or what have you, is sometimes it's kind of viewed like the common cold, like, oh, you have anxiety, sure, you'll get treated and then you'll be better. Mm-hmm. and then you're just better. But that's not really how it works. And I kind of wanted to put that out there in the world, and not just for people who have anxiety, but also for people who don't have anxiety and have loved ones who do, or have loved ones with depression or any number of chronic conditions, that it is a daily thing. And for people who do have these conditions, you have to kind of build up your own armor on how you deal and cope with this. And for Jessica, some of the things that we see her do in this issue is we see that, when she feels herself getting more and more anxious or more and more bad or kind of slipping, that she focuses on things like exercise or meditation, or spending quality time with her sister's cat, or spending quality time with her sister, or helping other people. I think the last one is particularly key for her, helping other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that you don't have to be a Green Lantern for that to work for you either. Helping other people is a great way to get out of your own head, to break that chain of rumination, to get out of that vortex of negative thought, to connect with other people, in their emotions and their lives. And, for me, being able to do that in a way that helps me realize that other people out there have problems, and I am not alone. And as bad as my anxiety is tricking me into feeling right now, it's ultimately not that horrible. Getting that kind of perspective has been super helpful for me. So I feel like Jessica really feeds off that, and that works great because she's a Green Lantern and it's her job to help people.
Love it. I just wanted to let you know that particular series of, I guess, strategies of things that she does to get herself out of the, the vortex, as you say, mm-hmm. That was really great for me to see, because it includes many things that I would recommend folks to do if they're anxious, like spending time with other people. And because Batman's my go-to character, I use the utility belt as an example that you should plan for those moments. And so in your utility belt, you have different tools and gadgets and items that are going to get you out of trouble or get you to feel better. And so to see Jessica do that with a number of different strategies was really so fulfilling for me to see in a comic book. I don't see a lot of that. I don't read a ton of comic books, but I still do read DC Comics. And so it really is as a professional, very satisfying for me to see that. And so I appreciate that you really took the time to lay it out there and to show this wonderful character doing those things.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I have the doctor's approval, because All of these things ring very true for me, but something that, without being too preachy about it, is that I do hope that people with anxiety, who have anxiety, I have anxiety, so I feel for these people, and not all of them have like the kind of support that I have. So if they feel lost, they don't know what to do, or even if you do have support, sometimes when you're vortexing so hard, it feels like nothing is going to bring you out of it. I hope that even something as stupid as this dumb little comic, like you can think about it and be like, oh my God, oh, I need to exercise here. I need to go
Yeah.
talk to somebody else. I need to go pet my cat. I need to meditate. Like all those things, you're right. Like the utility belt, that's so good. I love that metaphor because that's what it is. You have to develop
Right.
these sort of tricks and weapons to use when you need to dig yourself out. And, specifically for me, what I found is that the more that I use the utility belt, the stronger the gadgets get. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have to continue to strengthen those coping skills, and they're not easy. In the beginning, it's
Right.
it's like trying to use a battering for the first time. You have to get
Yes.
good at it. And so I appreciate you're talking a little bit about your personal experience. Can you share a little bit about what it's like for you, and maybe talk about those realizations that the moments where you realized that this is a story that other people might want to hear. That moment, you talked about other people possibly feeling validated. Did you have an experience like that where like a light bulb moment or this
Oh
experiential
yeah.
kind of moment of like, oh, I'm not alone here?
Yeah. I didn't have a light bulb moment. I had like a spotlight moment or light bulb the size of a sun moment. I mean, it
Wow.
was it was absolutely life changing for me, and it was like flipping a light switch. And actually, it involved our mutual friend Andy Corey.
I love
Uh,
Andy.
yes, he's great. Andy is, for those who don't recognize his name, he's editor at DC Comics. But Andy and I have been close friends for, God, like 13, 14 years now. Before either of us were even close to working for DC Comics. Anyway, so back in 2007, my dad passed away,
I'm sorry.
and thank you. And it was relatively out of the blue. He was in the hospital for 3 months, and then he died. So it was an extremely stressful time. And being one of the oldest siblings, it was kind of a couple months of logistics afterwards, and it was a while before it finally really caught up to me. And I I had an office job at the time, and I was sitting at my desk, and I just felt so horrible and so terrible, and I really felt like I was dying. Like I really felt like something terrible was happening to me. Like my my body was coming apart from the outside in, and my brain was going right off the rails with this pattern of thinking that seems so familiar to me now, but at the time it was so monumental, and I just didn't understand, and it felt like it was the end of me. Basically, it didn't feel like something that other people have had and lived through. You know what I mean? Like it felt like something that I couldn't possibly get through, and I don't even know why, but I ammed Andy, and I was like, I feel like I'm going to die, and I said maybe 10 words about what I was feeling like, and Andy was like, "Oh, well, you're having a panic attack," and I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, and immediately, like, I didn't feel 100% better, but I felt like 10 times better. And I was like, he's absolutely right. And I wasn't a stranger to panic attacks. Like, I knew what a panic attack was. I had friends who had panic attacks in front of me,
Mm.
which is kind of the insidious thing about the anxiety, right? Is that like when you're having it, it's part of the trick of the anxiety to
Yeah.
make you feel like it's not the anxiety.
Yeah.
Um, it was a light bulb moment. It was also kind of like, oh, dumbass. Like, of course this is a panic attack. Like, you've seen this happen to other people before. You've helped other friends with this before. Now it's happening to you. And then he was like, go take a walk outside. You're going to be fine. And I took a walk outside and I was fine. But it was at that moment where I realized that not just what was happening to me at my office job that day, but something that happened to me earlier that week, and something that happened to me in the previous month, and the previous year. And then the more I worked with it, and the more I understood it, the more I realized that I've been having anxiety problems for my entire life.
Wow.
And I think that I don't know, maybe you can speak to this, but for me and for Jessica too, it's like the anxiety didn't come from my dad dying. Anxiety didn't come from Jessica's friends being killed. Anxiety is a condition that we have. It's a brain condition. It's a matter of brain chemistry. But oftentimes, you just learn to cope really well. Even if you're not coping great, you're coping well enough to get by and coping well enough to fool yourself. And then it takes something like seeing your friends killed, it takes something like your father dying for it to really break open, and then you have to really understand what's been happening to you all this time. It's like breaking the egg open, and all of a sudden the yolk's all over the place. And you're like, well, I have to deal with this yolk now. Like there's no other way around it.
Right.
So for me, that was absolutely the light bulb moment, and it was so liberating to, some people are like, oh, you don't put labels on yourself and don't do this and don't do that. But for me, at least, it was so liberating to know that what I had was something that other people have been through, other people have survived, and other people understand. That made a world of difference for me.
Absolutely. And I absolutely agree with you as well that it may begin to manifest early on or throughout childhood and early development. There could be some functioning anxiety that folks experience. And actually in the episode we're covering, Tie This In, we'll talk a lot about why some anxiety is functional and actually good for us.
Yes.
It's adaptive to have some level of fear and anxiety, because those are the ways that our bodies are equipped to get us out of danger. I'm thinking about Batman, of course.
Yes.
I'm always thinking about Batman. And in the episode we're going to cover, Batman doesn't have fear and anxiety. He actually succumbs to the toxin. So it's kind of a cool thing we're covering. But I appreciate that, your experience is that it's kind of been there. Maybe it was manifesting in different ways, but it really is the amount of stress and trauma that we experience that could exacerbate it, or could even, elevate it to a point where we have to think about ways to treat it, to intervene, and to, appreciate that you are open to having, to identifying as someone who has an anxiety problem or anxiety condition. And anxiety is actually incredibly common, but people don't talk about it a lot. So that's something that I appreciate is happening within the realm of DC Comics, and with your being very open about your own history with it.
Well, I mean, I think you really said it in that some anxiety is healthy. Like the goal is to not ever have anxiety. The goal is to not ever be afraid. We need fear, and it's built into us. But I think we do live in a culture, specifically. I mean, let's talk about American culture, but I think this is a culture that prides being like very gung ho and take charge. And sort of being courageous and ignoring fear. And I think there's a lot to admire in that, but I do think it prevents people or discourages people from acknowledging or getting comfortable with the amount of fear that they're having. I think fear is something that we're taught in this culture that we should just be able to get over, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, don't be a coward, like all that kind of attitude. And I think it makes some people who do have a chronic condition, who do have anxiety, who does have a level of fears beyond what is healthy, prevents them from feeling like this is something that can be treated or should be treated. I think that they feel like weak or unworthy in that moment. Instead of feeling like this is something that I can fight and I should fight, and if I do fight, it will pay dividends, like pay off huge in my life.
How have the readers reacted, not just to the character, but, as you've been more open about your own history, what was the feedback like?
It's been huge. I mean, I didn't really quite understand how big the response would be. I kind of felt like maybe a handful of people would understand and be like, "Oh, this guy knows. This guy has anxiety. This guy knows exactly what I'm going through." You know what I mean? Like kind of that glimmer of recognition you had when she does the meditation, she does the exercise, and they'd be like, "Oh, somebody who knows this is writing this stuff." But I didn't really understand how widespread anxiety is, and I didn't understand how many people would already be reading the book, because a lot of people were reading it and were shocked and surprised to kind of see their experience mirrored in the book. And then the other thing is I even after have been working directly with my anxiety for almost 10 years now and researching it and talking with other people who have it, like I think I underestimated how universal the experience is for anxiety. And I think that's something that the disorder does to you. Like it makes you feel like what you're going through nobody else can understand and there's no hope for you. When really, like even just like the simple things that I can put into here and there in a comic book, like they ring so true for other people of anxiety. And I think that really speaks to how that if you have anxiety and you feel this way, like you're absolutely not alone. Like you are not the first person to feel this way. You're not the last person to feel this way. And there are ways people have been through this before. I have been through this before. I've gotten through this. And if I can be, out here living a normal life, writing comic books, having cats, getting married, all the things that I do, then you can do that too. If you have anxiety, there are ways out of this. You are not trapped in an impossible maze. It is actually quite very possible, and there's been lots of people, not just me, but before me, who have been through that maze. And if we can all do it, you can come out of it too.
I love that message. And again, what I found is that for the most part, we don't see these stories as commonplace. Actually, for persons who have problems with, anxiety, depression, suicidality, we often see them as victims. We often see them as the folks that superheroes help.
Right.
And so it's such a treasure, and it's such a great thing to see. I think of it as a diversity component that as we are more inclusive in comics, we want to think about persons with mental health conditions and who are in the in the spotlight. They're the main characters. They're the heroes. They're the ones who are representing so many of us out in our own mental health communities, so to speak. So I just treasure that, and I appreciate that you're participating in that element of diversity.
Yeah, I mean, it seems so clear to me right off the bat. Like I just had this vision right off the bat with Jessica that Green Lanterns, they started off with you could be a Green Lantern if you were without fear, and then Jeff Johns modified that to be if you were a person who could overcome great fear, which I thought was such a great twist on the legacy. And I knew it would be it would feel strange or unnatural to some readers to see somebody who had anxiety, who had so much fear, to be chosen by a Green Lantern ring. But I knew right away that kind of the story I wanted to tell is that because Jessica overcomes great fear on a daily basis, because she overcomes great fear just to get out of bed in the morning, that makes her extremely qualified to be a Green Lantern. It's one thing for Hal Jordan to overcome fear when he's battling, Starro or Sinestro or whoever, but Jessica's fear comes from inside of her. The fear that she overcomes comes from within her, and it's a very different struggle and a very different journey. And I realized that for her to come to the ring, having already overcome great fear on a regular basis, her anxiety was giving her qualifications. Her anxiety was making her a better Green Lantern, or at least the experience of overcoming her anxiety was making her a better Green Lantern. And I truly believe that, like, not just in the fantasy setting of a comic book. I feel like if you are somebody who overcomes anxiety, if you are somebody who overcomes depression, like, you're not just pulling yourself out of a hole, you're not just a victim, you're actually learning things, you're actually developing strength, you're developing talent, and you have experiences that not everybody has. And these are experiences that can be valuable in your relationships, in your community, in your job. So I really think that this, having anxiety, having depression, like it doesn't make you damaged. Like it truly does make you stronger, and it will give you things that it will give you gifts that will be gifts to other people in your life. And I mean, heck, it made me extremely qualified to write Green Lanterns
Right.
here and to sit here and talk to you about it. So I hope that people listening understand that having these chronic conditions is something that not just makes you a stronger person in the Hallmark card sense, but it really will make you qualified to tackle things that most people won't be able to do.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I want to take a minute to also mention that you're a creator of a comic book called Jonesy, which is
Yes.
available through the publisher Boom Studios. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Jonesy is a much different comic book than people who read DC Comics might experience, but it's a cartoony book about a teenage girl who has secret love powers. So she has the ability to make anybody fall in love with anything else. The
Amazing.
trick is that it doesn't, yes, right? But it doesn't work on herself. So she can't just make anybody fall in love with her or vice versa. And I created with my friend Caitlin Rose Boyle, who is an incredible cartoonist. And it's much more in the vein of like an Adventure Time or Scott Pilgrim than something like Green Lanterns. But I think people who read Jessica specifically and respond to Jessica would really enjoy reading Jonesy as well.
I'm just thinking about a recent interview that I was watching on YouTube. For fun, I just watch Michael Fassbender interviews on YouTube, specifically about his work
Now
on
we're learning something about you, Dre. Now we're learning.
specifically about some of his work with the other actors on X-Men on the films. And it's interesting because interviewers will often ask them, like, if you had any superpower, like if you were an X-Men, what would be your
Right.
superpower? And he actually often will say that he wants the power to influence love. Like he wants the power to influence who's attracted to whom. And I
Oh,
think he's hinting that he also had the power to influence who could be attracted to him. Which I'm like, why do you absolutely do not need this. But I'm thinking about Jonesy. I think that's such a great idea. And I'm going to look it up. I'm excited to check it out.
yeah, yeah. Please check it out. It's yeah. Michael Fassbender does not need Jonesy's help. He's all right. He's doing good for himself.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you wanted to let us know, to look out for, or anything else you wanted to say either about either comic?
God, no. I think listeners of your show will be happy to know that we mentioned issue 15 before. Issue 16 kicks off a two-part team up with Batman,
Yes.
which I loved writing. The Batman actually needs help for once, and he has to call in the Green Lanterns, and they come to Gotham, and it's just a cool two-part story. And then after that, God, there's so much I want to talk about, but so much I'm not allowed to talk about. Suffice to say, there's a lot of big plans coming up from the books. A lot of it begins in issue 18, and I'm very, very excited about it. And I was writing some of it just earlier today before we talked.
Awesome. Well, we are looking forward to that, and I'll keep in touch. So maybe we can let our listeners know when they can look out for some of those exciting things that
Yeah.
unfold. How can folks check you out online? What's the best way that folks can interact with you online?
Best way is on Twitter. My handle is at Sam Humphries. Very simple. And yeah, particularly if you have anxiety, feel free to like reach out to me on Twitter. I talk with a lot of people about anxiety on Twitter, specifically how it relates to Green Lantern. So, don't be afraid to say hi.
Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate your time. And, folks, please check out Green
Sure.
Lantern. Check out
Thank you
Sam
so much
Humphries
for having
online.
me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next week, please check out our episode, Never Fear, which of course features the villain Scarecrow. And in this episode, he actually takes away fear. And so we'll be asking questions and wondering whether having some anxiety or some level of anxiety is helpful for us. And what happens to Batman when he's not anxious at all? He has no fear whatsoever. It's quite interesting. So please check that out. Until then, for Brian Ward, I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi. I appreciate your listening to the show. We're on Twitter at Arkham Sessions, and we're also on Facebook, The Arkham Sessions on Facebook. You can also check out all of our episodes on fanbasepress.com. And both Brian and myself are on Twitter. Check us out. And if you like this interview, please let us know, and we will think about including interviews in the future. Thanks so much.